Uh-huh. I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods. Yeah, one in particular, I'm just a messenger. Let me just pass on the rock. Browning, brunning, pruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you, you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box, and you cannot compare them at all. So don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, yeah. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, woo. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable Podcast. It is Tuesday and we are wrapping up our unit grades today with a look at AFC pass catchers. And wouldn't you know it, as has been the case throughout these unit grades, the NFL did us a solid and gave us some AFC player news in our pass catching group as Nico Collins gets a 3-year $72.5 million extension. Maybe it was $75.2 million extension. You know, numbers are hard. $52 million guaranteed. Texans going all in. They're building, as we mentioned, quite a fun offense. We know Diggs is there for 1 year, but Schultz, a multi-year contract. Tank Dell, a multi-year contract. Collins gets a multi-year extension. Mixon, a multi-year contract. They have at least 4 more years with CJ Stroud. What do you think of the Collins deal, and what do you think of the Texans' offense?
The Texans' offense looks like it is going to be putting up some points in 2024. So when they signed Diggs, some of us kind of went a little bit on the fence with Nico Collins. And it was like, is he really the guy? He had some good games, but he's going into his 4th year this year. So it took him 2 or 3 years to get rolling. So, you know, which if it was 10 or 15 years ago, we'd be like, oh, he's right on schedule.
I mean, to be fair, his first couple of years, they had kind of a garbage team around.
I get it. But still, so now he's like hitting his stride. He's solid with the team. Tank Dell has flashed some real impressive playmaking. Dalton Schultz is solid, if not spectacular. And I apologize for all the hissing S words to start off this segment. You know, they signed Cade Stover or drafted Cade Stover as the eventual successor to Dalton Schultz. And Stover is essentially athletically a carbon copy of Dalton Schultz. So it looks like they know what they're doing. They're talking up Dameon Pierce as the backup to Joe Mixon. I don't know if a running back that's never been successful in a zone scheme can eventually become successful in a zone scheme. What we do know is Joe Mixon is very successful in his own scheme. And even at 27, 28 years old now, he should have a good couple seasons left. Never been known for his efficiency. So we're not going to go and try to grade Joe Mixon on efficiency. He's a volume back. And in fantasy football, we're chasing volume. Who's going to get the ball in their hands? And Joe Mixon's going to get it in Houston. And now it looks like so is Nico Collins. They restructured that Diggs deal to like you said, essentially a 1-year deal. Diggs is going to be 32 next year. You know, it seems like he's getting disgruntled after a few seasons in each location. Houston is kind of preemptively saying, look, if you want to stick around after this first year, we can maybe make it work, but we're not going to be tied to you being miserable and unproductive. If you want to stay here, you're going to have to produce.
Well, and it makes it kind of a low barrier. It wasn't a huge amount that they had to give in draft capital to trade for him, and it makes it kind of a low barrier investment. You know, if he's really great this this year, then they can re-up, kind of like what they did with Dalton Schultz last year. Schultz came in on a 1-year deal after having been with Cowboys and a franchise tag player, and they loved what they saw, and they ended up making a long-term commitment. But they're building quite a team. I do wonder too if part of bringing in Diggs and making sure they have him for this 1 year is we forget Dell coming back off that broken leg, which I believe happened in December. So
yeah, it was late in the season.
It was pretty late in the season, so getting everything up and going. I'm excited to watch the Texans. That was the good news story.
Well, before we move on, a big key for the Texans in their depth area is going to be guys like Xavier Hutchinson. Does Robert Woods have anything left in the tank? Who is it? It seems like they added there's somebody I'm missing. John Mechie, he did a little bit. So it comes down to, will any of these guys mature into, can any of them be Juwan Jennings? If that happens, Houston could be like set up. They still have Noah Brown. He's getting a little bit older, put up a couple monster games last year, but he's really a wide receiver 4. So
I am curious about Mechie, because he there was a lot of excitement when he got drafted. But then obviously he had his illness to recover from. We haven't really seen much in a couple of years, but there are a couple of teams where I'm still hanging on to him, waiting to see.
Yeah, I've not cut bait on him. So it'll be if their depth can take a step and develop, if their depth players can hold off Ben Skoranek, then I think they'll be just fine.
They traded for him. You remember last year too, when there was a whole group of people that were on the Xavier Hutchinson is better than Tank Dell train?
I don't remember people being on the he's better than Tank Dell. I liked Xavier Hutchinson. Tank Dell made me nervous because he's so small. But dude produced. So
I feel like it's the same. People have divided up camps between, probably a lower ceiling between Jalen Polk and Javon Baker.
Right.
Be curious to see. Well, the one other piece of news, Brandon McManus, who I did not realize is now with the Washington Commanders, has been accused of sexual assault by some ladies that worked for the Jacksonville Jaguars on their flights, the team he was with last year. Probably not great for a Washington team that was trying to distance itself from these kind of scandals under its previous ownership. He signed I believe they said a 1-year kind of not a lot of money deal. You think Washington tries to ride this out? You think there's any chance he gets released? I know people are out there playing in all kicker leagues, so this is going to have an impact.
He's how old is he? It feels like
he's been playing for a while. He was very good for a while for the Broncos, got released as a cap casualty last year. He was 30 of 37 on field goals, made all 35 extra points for the Jaguars last year. I thought he was okay.
Yeah, and the way this complaint is structured, it feels like if McManus gets in trouble, the Jaguars are getting in trouble.
Yeah.
And because it's like the old college, failure of institutional control or something like that. And they're saying, these ladies are saying they told the Jaguars, they did, they reported it and it still happened. So I feel like, it's not a good look. It's not the 70s anymore. Well, that stuff has never been appropriate. It was overlooked back in the day. Says he's sounding like an old fart. Boys will be boys kind of approach. It's different now. And you have to behave respectfully all the time, which you should. I'm not saying you shouldn't.
Right. It'll be interesting to see play out. It's been a fairly successfully quiet off season for Washington up to this point. So
It
hopefully,
feels like an easy cut for them. They'll just be like, you know what? We don't need this headache. We've got enough stuff.
well, it didn't look like there was a lot of guaranteed money, and it's not like he's been a fixture there for a while. So be interesting to see. Well, we are going to turn our attention to the AFC pass catching groups. That is both receivers and tight ends. And Dennis, to start off today, you and I have the same two teams as the bottom team, so we have them in a different order. I'm going to let you go first and give your number 16.
So I went with the Los Angeles Chargers at 16, and it was a battle. I got to be honest. I had them in the same order that you had them, and going back and comparing them, honestly, it just felt like, well, having low ceiling guys in New England, who was 15, it felt like they had a higher floor than the Charger guys. Joshua Palmer is really the one Charger that has some bona fides, and he's not really he hasn't been given a great opportunity over the course of his career. I like him. He's still pretty young. I think he's only 25 years old. So he's still pretty young, and this will be his first real shot at being the guy. Whether he can hold off Quentin Johnston, who hasn't done squat and did not look like he belonged in the NFL at times last year. Ladd McConkey is coming in as a rookie, and that's their starting three. Then they've got Darius Davis, who's a little kind of slot guy. Brendan Rice is their next backup, and then the veteran DJ Chark. Honestly, I would probably feel better about this team if they had listed Chark as a starter over Johnston or McConkey, because then Chark is a professional receiver. He just can't stay healthy. He's had one really good year. I feel like Chark is the Quentin Johnston guy. He should be in the starting lineup. He's the go deep guy. I don't think I don't know that putting Johnston in that role is going to be. He's not a fight for the ball guy like Chark is. And at tight end, they got Will Dissly, Stone Smart,
your boy Donald Parham.
I love Donald Parham, but we're just not there with him. Hayden Hurst is there. Talk about flaming out. I thought Hurst was going to be something in Carolina, and he just crashed and burned.
Well, he got injured though.
Yeah, but still, crashed and burned. So in a nutshell, I just felt like the low floor veterans in New England of Kendrick Bourne and Hunter Henry, I felt like they provided more stability than the Chargers receivers.
Yeah, and I'm just gonna say I don't think either of these groups were good. If we were going at tight end rooms, the Patriots do offer Hunter Henry, who I think is probably better than anyone on the Chargers. Beyond him, they have Austin Hooper, which, if he still has something left. So they have an interesting top two. You are correct. The Chargers have like four guys, but I don't know how much I'm trusting any of them. But when it got to receivers, I guess I like the potential upside of Johnson, McConkey, and Brendan Rice more than what I see in New England. Javon Baker keeps telling everyone he's God's gift to receiving. I guess I'll have to see it. They have Kayshon Boutte and Jalen Reagor, who are prospects that have kind of flamed out. Tyquan Thornton, the guy they took in the second round just 2 years ago, probably won't even make the team. Juju, I thought that was a decent move last year, but he had nothing left, and that kind of scares me. KJ Osborne, I don't know what I'm getting there. I don't know what I'm getting from Jalen Polk. Kendrick Bourne and Demario Douglas are fine. It just I I did not like them enough to vault them over the Chargers. I don't think either of those rooms is very good, but for me,
You
I
know,
guess I'm still more of a believer in Johnson than you are, and hopeful that this new offense and these new coaches can get something out of him.
I think vaulting over it is a really, really strong statement. It's more like eked out a race to the bottom, not a vaulting over.
Yeah. Well, and the only thing I could really think about looking at this is I feel bad for Justin Herbert, but boy, do I feel bad for Drake May, who, you know, we've talked about this before, the high rate of rookie quarterbacks that have flamed out in recent years, but I think you have to start looking at some of the supporting casts they're getting are not spectacular. We have the same number 14, and that is the Pittsburgh Steelers. How the mighty have kind of slumped a little bit, but tell me, why is Pittsburgh down for you?
In Pittsburgh, it really comes down to depth, and they don't have any this year. Fryermuth is a decent tight end, but he could be tight end 8 or he could be tight end 18. And I'm not ready to bet on that. Darnell Washington could cannibalize some of the tight end touches. It doesn't feel like they're going to use the tight end, probably as much as they should with their wide receiver group. And they've got Van Jefferson slotted to be a starter. And as much as I would like to say, well, they've got to do something else, they just don't have anything else. Roman Wilson is set up to be their slot guy. I like Roman Wilson a lot. They got George Pickens on the outside, but that group of Van Jefferson, Calvin Austin, Scotty Miller, Quez Watkins, Denzel Mims, and Marquez Callaway, any one of those could be your wide receiver 3 on any given day. And more likely, they're all going to be the wide receiver 5. It's not a good group. And it bodes well for George Pickens and probably Roman Wilson and maybe by default Fryermuth, but their depth is awful. It looks like if you're going to roster Pittsburgh Steelers in the receiving game, it's George Pickens. And if you're going to roster any other Pittsburgh Steelers, it's Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren.
Yeah, I'm with you. George Pickens is probably the only receiver that even gives you a bit of confidence. And, you have to wonder what the passing game is going to be. It's like ghosts of depth charts past. You're right here looking at, Van Jefferson. We have Calvin Austin, Quez Watkins, Scotty Miller, Denzel Mims, Marquez Callaway. You forgot Des Fitzpatrick.
I didn't forget.
Yeah. I like Pat Fryermuth okay as well, but I think it's a credit to George Pickens. They're even 14 and not lower, even despite the way I feel about the two teams below them. Number 13, we both had the same, and that is the Denver Broncos. And basically, I will say I still love Cortland Sutton, but I don't know a ton of what they are doing here. There's a lot of being put on Marvin Mims, who we did not see much from as a rookie, to step up. Tim Patrick has missed the last 2 seasons with devastating leg injuries. How quickly can he work himself back? I liked Brandon Johnson. We'll see if he hangs around. Little Jordan Humphrey feels like kind of a role player, special teams guy. Josh Reynolds is a nice glue guy. But then, what are we going to get out of Troy Franklin? They have a lot of options, but outside of Cortland Sutton, nothing makes me feel incredible. The only reason I gave them the nod over Pittsburgh is I feel like they have slightly better depth.
Yeah. So with Marvin Mims, I don't know if I'd say he wasn't productive. I would say he didn't get opportunity. When he got opportunity, he did produce. The question for 2024 is, will he get more opportunity? or is this just going to be another Sean Payton hates you and, you're going to get a few touches for the next 3 years and then hopefully go somewhere as a free agent? I don't know. I love Cortland Sutton. Josh Reynolds, he's produced in spurts. He hasn't been consistent over the years. I like him a lot. He was good for the Detroit Lions, my team. But right now, Reynolds, I think if Tim Patrick's healthy, I think Patrick moves ahead of Josh Reynolds. But I agree with you. I don't know what Patrick has left after 2 years of devastating knee injuries. That's going to be something to watch. Troy Franklin's got an uphill battle. I know Bo Nix is there, and there's that familiarity, but there's a reason he fell to the 4th round. So I'm not sold on that. Little Jordan Humphrey, he's big. He's got that going for him. I think Brandon Johnson is too. So they've got some size at wide receiver, and with Mims, they've got some speed. I think Franklin's pretty fast too. But it's anchored by Cortland Sutton and what they got, Dulcich, Adam Troutman and Greg Dulcich at tight end.
Lucas Kroll, probably. I don't really trust Dulcich either. So, and I guess you and I have a different opinion of Mims. Mine's born of having watched every single minute of every single Broncos game. He's got a lot more Jerry Jeudy in him than I was hoping for.
That wouldn't surprise me either. All I know is when he got his chances, he produced. He made plays.
Oh, that's what I'm saying. That's not entirely accurate. He botched when they would try to get him involved as much as he made plays. So you and I have the same number 12, and that is the Buffalo Bills. Kind of a fall off for the Bills, but Dennis, they have they lost probably their 2 marquee names in the receiver room.
Man, who'd have thought that losing Gabe Davis would knock you all the way down to 12 in the AFC?
It's not just Gabe Davis.
Well, I mean, Stephon Diggs was wide receiver 44 the second half of the season. I mean, it was a rough second half. I mean, this team is Josh Allen, and that's it. They brought in Curtis Samuel. They drafted Keon Coleman, signed Chase Claypool and Mac Hollins and Marquez Valdez-Scantling. That's the threesome I want to see out there. I want to see those.
You better watch the first preseason game.
That's like the Keystone Cops. Let's get those jokers out there.
You forgot they also have the ghosts of Christmas Past in KJ Hamler.
They do. I mean, do we have this group too high?
Andy Isabella.
I mean,
I'm laughing looking at it. Well, I think this is one of the first teams in the AFC, for me at least, where the tight end boosted them, because I think Dalton Kincaid is very good, and we've seen Dawson Knox be very good professional tight end too. So they have 2 decent tight ends. Coleman needs to pan out. I also think Curtis Samuel is a very underrated wide receiver, and I really liked what I saw from Khalil Shakir last year. That's enough for me to put them up. It couldn't put them on any higher, but I think this is one group where the tight end helps them, because you're right. Like, looking at the receiver room, it's hard not to get a little nervous.
I mean, Keon Coleman could be Kelvin Benjamin, or he could be Laquan Treadwell. I'm in ongoing rookie draft right now, and throughout a good portion of the late first to the late second, they were calling him Keon Treadwell or Laquan Coleman. Nikhil Coleman. It was just.
Well, we'll see how it. I mean, I almost feel like Buffalo's offense in the second half of last season showed they don't really even need a receiver.
Right. So. It's going to be James Cook, Ray Davis, and Dalton Kincaid, and Josh Allen.
It's kind of they're kind of building that Travis Kelce, 2022, more like the 2022 Chiefs offense.
Yeah, it's which is scary if you're a Josh Allen rosterer.
He'll just have to run for 1,000 yards.
Yeah, he may have to.
Next up, we had the same team at 11, and that was the Baltimore Ravens. And for me, you know, I liked what we saw from Zay Flowers. They keep saying Rashad Bateman's finally going to take a step forward. I want to believe because I still
Towards the
have
door.
so many shares, but I'm not sure. Then Nelson Aguilar kind of sliding in there. He was there last year. They still have Tylen Wallace. I thought the Tez Walker draft signing was interesting. Deontay Hardy feels like more of a special teams play, but this is another team where the tight end room really boosts them because they still have a guy named Mark Andrews, who I like quite a lot. Isaiah Likely, I still like quite a lot, is their number 2. And even Charlie Kohler, I think, has some upside as a tight end 3. So tight end, combined with, I think maybe they have a slightly more reliable, at least receiver 1 than Buffalo. So that was enough to nudge them past the Bills for me.
Yeah, Zay Flowers looked good last year. I think the ongoing concern with him is going to be, can he stay healthy, because he's one of those little guys from the last draft class or 2 classes ago. And if he struggles with health, he'll never reach his potential. But if he can stay healthy, I think Lamar Jackson will get him the ball. We've seen Jackson do that with Marquise Brown, even with Mark Andrews and Hayden Hurst being productive at tight end. So I'm not too worried about the wide receiver 1 in Baltimore. I'd be happy to roster Zay Jones, and I'll take a shot on Rashad Bateman. Nelson Aguilar is a fantasy zombie. He's going to have games that make people go out and add him to the roster, and then he's going to disappear. I'm just doing all I can to avoid that. I still don't know what we're going to get out of Tylen Wallace. Devontae Walker's got some warts, so we'll have to see how he matures. It really rides on Andrews, Likely, and Flowers.
So we also had the same number 10, and that is the Colts. They have kind of a mysterious tight end room. I don't know if I would put stock in feeling confident on any of them, but they've built a pretty decent receiver room. What did you like about the Colts?
Well, I love Michael Pittman, and I think he's shown that he's got a good rapport with Anthony Richardson, even though they only had a couple games together. Josh Downs, the same thing. Richardson was productive with Josh Downs. So, and they're kind of opposite. They play different roles in that offense. Alec Pierce was supposed to be the speed guy, the outside guy, and he just hasn't produced. And so they went out and got A.D. Mitchell. I like that addition. I think Mitchell, though, is maddening because he can look like the best receiver on the field, or he can look like he don't give 2 shits about being there. And he's going to have to balance that out and get more consistent at the NFL level, or he's just going to end up being an issue, and coaches will ride him into the ground and break his spirit. And that's just not good. They have some bodies at tight end that have produced. You just don't know which one's going to be catching the touchdown pass every 3 games. Jelani Woods missed all of last year, but he's listed as the starter. Kylan Granson was a 4th rounder. Mo Alley Cox is a veteran who's been around. Will Mallory's an athletic 5th rounder from last year. So they have, quote unquote, some bodies. I'd like to see him consolidate the usage there. And if that happens, you may be able to find a 2nd or 3rd tier productive tight end. Woods is a big guy with good mobility. Will Mallory is very athletic. Granson isn't too bad. I think the thing with Mo Alley Cox is he's just gotten older and he's starting to transition into that, 6th offensive lineman phase of his career.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes. I definitely like the receiver group, though. I really like Michael Pittman, and I think Adonai Mitchell and Josh Downs gives them a good solid. And, Alec Pierce, we thought had a lot of potential when he was taken, now as their kind of 4th receiver. maybe it's slipped out of favor a little bit, but gives them some depth. And then they have some interesting guys, that we've seen to provide some depth. But I like that starting three. And you're right, they have a group at tight end at least. You and I have the same top four teams in the same order, but this soft middle from 9 to 5, we have the same 5 teams, but in a different order. So why don't you give us your 9?
I have the Tennessee Titans at number 9. I just felt like they have an aging DeAndre Hopkins, an aging Calvin Ridley, an aging Tyler Boyd, all serviceable guys. But I think at this stage, we're kind of waiting to see, does Calvin Ridley have what it takes to be a number 1 again? I think Hopkins is on the decline, still a good receiver. Tyler Boyd, I think what he brings to the table is he knows the offense. I don't think that the backups are too bad with Kyle Phillips, Nick Westbrook-Akini, and Traylon Burks. And then they've got Chigo Okonkwo at tight end, and Josh Wiley behind him, Nick Vannett after that. Okonkwo, I just don't think provides the consistency. We're going to throw all these guys out there with what is Levis going into his second year or third year?
Yeah, second year.
So his first year as the established starter, we'll have to see how he grows. But I just felt like they've got some high floor, low ceiling guys here. And I suppose as I talk through this, I could make a case for moving Indianapolis ahead of them because of Michael Pittman's ceiling at this point. But I think Tennessee has good receivers that you wouldn't mind having as your wide receiver 3. Maybe, you're good with Ridley as your wide receiver 2, but how much cannibalization is going to happen with Tyler Boyd and DeAndre Hopkins? Will they be a lower volume offense because Levis struggles? So it's going to be touch and go with Tennessee.
Yeah, so I'm not that much higher on Tennessee than you. I had them at number 8, which is one spot higher. I actually have Jacksonville at 9. The Jaguars, I like Christian Kirk, and he's been a good fit there, and I think Evan Ingram's been a good fit at tight end. I don't know what we're going to get from Brian Thomas Jr. We'll see how that works out. Gabe Davis, I have never been a big fan. I think he's wildly inconsistent, and I think they had some wildly inconsistent wide receiver play last year too, which scares me. And then beyond them, I don't like the depth that they have. I'm not sold on Parker Washington. I know people thought that we're waiting for a big breakout. He was a 6th round choice a year ago. Devin Duvernay never really did anything in Baltimore, and he's potentially your wide receiver 4. So I have Tennessee just ahead of them because I like Ridley and Hopkins better at the top of the order. And I definitely like Boyd, Burks, Nick Westbrook-Akini, and Kyle Phillips as my depth group better than what the Jaguars have to offer. So that was why I have them flipped. But you have a different team entirely at number 8. So who do you have?
I have the New York Jets. And this is on the back of Garrett Wilson. I think, he's a top 5 wide receiver. And then they signed Mike Williams, who has this, he's the, who's the actor that has a very specific set of skills?
Liam Neeson.
Yeah. Mike Williams is the Liam Neeson of wide receivers. He has a very specific set of skills. And I think that's going to work out well with Aaron Rodgers. Malachi Corley is slated to be in the slot, but Xavier Gibson and Jason Brownlee both played well when given opportunities in the shit show that was last season. Alan Lazard, honestly, I think he might be the wide receiver 6 on this team. The only thing keeping him there, I think, is Aaron Rodgers. Malik Taylor, he flashed a little bit in Green Bay. Lance McCutcheon flashed a little bit out in Los Angeles. I don't think they've got great depth, but I do think that Garrett Wilson and Mike Williams provide a top end. And then at tight end, I love Tyler Conklin this year and Jeremy Ruckert. If Conklin can maintain his passing volume, he might be a top 5 tight end.
So I will wait and talk about the Jets. I have them much higher than you, which is this is probably our biggest disparity in this list. At number 7, you have the Jaguars, who I had talked about at 9. What had you putting the Jags there?
I think Christian Kirk is such an underrated wide receiver. I think he is a guy that really puts up numbers. He's got a great connection with Trevor Lawrence, and I think he'll continue to put up numbers. Gabe Davis, I get it. He can be wildly inconsistent, and I don't know that I expect that to change. But he's a good outside receiver. He's probably he's in the Mike Williams category right now, I think. But both of those guys lack consistency. And I get that Brian Thomas Jr. is a rookie. But when I look at LSU and their recent wide receiver production, I'm going to bet that Brian Thomas is going to be the Jamar Chase to Malik Neighbors, Justin Jefferson. I think the potential is there. And I agree with you. I think their depth is not great at wide receiver, but I do like what they have at tight end and Evan Ingram. And I know they list Brenton Strange as the 3, but he's an athletic tight end that was a second rounder last year. Luke Farrell, another Buckeye tight end. There's a bunch of Buckeye tight ends in the NFL. They just all happen to be glorified tackles. But I think Brenton Strange provides good depth behind Evan Ingram. And Evan Ingram is a top 7 or 8 tight end. But I think Christian Kirk is he's the gears that make that engine go. And I just liked I like Davis and Thomas more than you do.
Wouldn't be hard. Davis. Well, I like Thomas. I just, he's still a rookie. It just Gabe Davis doesn't do anything for me. My number 7 is the Las Vegas Raiders, who you have at 6. I like Devontae Adams. I think I'm curious how Jacoby Meyer is going to fit. He was definitely a signing last year that felt very specific to what Josh McDaniels wanted to do, and it feels like they're going kind of a different way. Then they have a strange kind of collection. Trey Tucker showed some flashes last year. Michael Gallup and Jalen Guyton, a couple of depth guys. So I think it's an interesting group, and obviously like Adams. And then at tight end, they have both Brock Bowers, who was our top tight end in the class, and Michael Mayer, who they took early last year. I think it's a decent group. My bigger question for them is probably their quarterback play, but I think it's a decent enough group that I have them up in the top half of the draw here in the AFC.
Yeah, I mean, I have the Raiders one spot ahead of you at 6. And so, the Devontae Adams, Jacoby Myers duo showed last year that they can coexist and be very productive. And then Trey Tucker was the bomb guy, but they got him listed as the slot. He's extremely fast. He's a 4.35 guy, somewhere in that range. And then their depth with Gallup, Guyton, and I don't even know who DJ Turner is. So anybody outside the top 5 there, I'm really not counting on, especially because of the depth they have at tight end. Because not only do they have Bowers and Michael Mayer, they also have Hunter Bryant, who was a very good pass-catching tight end, I think at Florida Atlantic or Florida International. Spent his first contract with the Browns. So they've got really, really, really good depth at tight end. I'm wondering, are we getting to the point yet where Devontae Adams makes the Larry Fitzgerald move and moves into the slot and extends his career that way? He's never been known for his speed. He's a strong at the catch point receiver that gets open in short areas. doing that would move Tucker back to the shot play guy and maybe open up an opportunity for Michael Gallup to see if he's back from his injury. And
I
I
do
think
think a starting three of Gallup, Myers, and Adams would be a little bit stronger than having Tucker in there.
I agree. But so to me, I'm looking at it with Adams, Myers, Bowers, and Mayer. I think they have four bona fide receivers, and then with the depth of Tucker and Tucker Gallup and Harrison Bryant, I think that's that goes what 7 deep there.
Yeah, and we've seen Harrison Bryant be a weapon in the passing game, so you don't want to discount him. My 6 is your 5, which is the Kansas City Chiefs, and I think they've been a big riser the last couple of years. The Rashee Rice, off the field might be a little scary, but on the field really panned out well for them. I liked the addition of Hollywood Brown that they brought in. I like the pick of Xavier Worthy, and they still have Sky Moore and Justin Watson kicking around. Kadarius Toney when they need somebody to come in and drop a key pass. He is available, but they have
Speaking
a great
of a specific set of skills.
Yeah, they have a great tight end group led by Travis Kelce, but they quietly added Irv Smith. That's an interesting piece of depth. They also have Noah Gray, who I thought looked good at times. They drafted Jared Wiley, so they have a group there as well. That was enough for me to put them up as my favorite pass catching group in the AFC West, which hurts emotionally and spiritually.
So I've got them at 5, and it's not because they signed Irv Smith. I mean,
he's listed as tight end 4, so it's not like you're expecting a lot.
I'm surprised you mentioned him. I think Jared Wiley athletically seems like the successor to Travis Kelce. For the longest time, they had Blake Bell there, former Oklahoma quarterback who converted to tight end, but he was big and fast and seemed like that, but just Travis Kelce just never moved on and never got bad. I think we're getting to the point where Kelce's getting older. And so in a couple of years, I think it might be feasible that Wiley takes over for Kelce. Noah Gray, I think, is solid. He's going into his third or fourth season. He was a class of 21. Their wide receivers, it feels like they're kind of all the same guy, but truth be told, Rashee Rice is a little bit bigger. He's probably height-wise the same as Worthy, and he's thicker. Worthy, I think, is 6'1", but he's only about 175 pounds. They have a ton of speed at the wide receiver position. It's going to be interesting to watch how this plays out with all of that speed if they can catch the ball. Xavier Worthy has shown that he's inconsistent in tracking the ball. He's going to have to overcome that. Rice has his off-the-field stuff going on. I don't know that it affects him this season, so take that for what it's worth. And Hollywood Brown he's in that bounce-around phase of his career, and so I don't know if we're ever going to find the consistency that he had earlier in his career, especially in this situation where he's got a couple guys with very similar skill sets to what he does and how they get open. I like the group on paper, and playing with Patrick Mahomes, who is going to throw the ball, is always a good thing. So that, I don't think they're taking targets from Kelce, but I do like the big playability they have.
Well, and then up at 5 for me is where I have the Jets. I mentioned this was kind of our biggest. You have them down at 8.
You love you some Malachi Corley.
Yeah, I mean, you talked about loving a lot of people in the group, not as much as me, apparently. I love Garrett Wilson a lot. I thought the Mike Williams signing was good. I liked the draft pick of Malachi Corley. I loved what I saw from Xavier Gibson last year. He's a guy I was stashing. I think you're right. Like Alan Lazard might end up being an odd man out, but he has played better with Aaron Rodgers, so maybe that'll help. And then Tyler Conklin, kind of a under the radar late grab at tight end. So I have them up at 5. Maybe because I just hate myself. I don't know, because I've never been a big Jets fan or a big Rodgers fan, but I ended up vaulting him up there. We have the same number 4, and that is the Cleveland Browns, who've done quite a bit of adding to their room the last couple of years.
Yeah, they brought in Elijah Moore. They traded for Jerry Jeudy. They drafted David Bell and Cedric Tillman, and drafted Jamari Thrash this year. Now, they're not spending top-end draft capital, mostly because they didn't have any because of the Deshaun Watson trade. But they're trying to overcome it with volume. They traded away Donovan Peoples-Jones, who was one of these, 3rd or 4th round guys that they drafted. They've got a couple special teamers for depth. But it revolves around Amari Cooper and David Njoku. Those are the top 2 dogs in the Cleveland offense. Frustratingly, their backup tight ends will, like last year it was Bryant and Jordan Akins. Those guys sometimes will get touchdowns that they have no reason getting. So that's frustrating. Elijah Moore, with the trade for Jerry Jeudy, is going to need to show that he belongs, and I think he's up to the task. But it revolves around Amari Cooper.
I've seen Jerry Jeudy play. I think Elijah Moore will be just fine.
I am going to take his role.
I don't know. I mean, I have him up here at 4, despite my disdain for Jerry Jeudy. If you're all in on Jerry Jeudy, God bless you. I hope you enjoy your season. I love Amari Cooper. I love what David Njoku did last year. Love to see that continue. I liked the Elijah Moore pickup last year and what we saw from him. I think from a fantasy perspective, my personal feelings aside, it's probably Jeudy and Moore are going to cut into each other. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a situation where one of them's great one week and another one's great the other week. It's hard to imagine there's going to be 3 or 4 consistent fantasy scores every week, because the Browns are still a very good running team and they have a very loaded running back room too. But they've put together a nice group. So, and they still have Cedric Tillman and David Bell back there for depth. Some interesting prospects. So that was enough for me to pop them there. Just ahead of them at number 3, we have their division mates, the Cincinnati Bengals. And Bengals still high for me, even after losing Tyler Boyd. I love Chase and Higgins. I think that is a great 2-man duo. I liked the Jermaine Burton pick. So, I think he'll have a role in there. I like that as a pickup. Trenton Irwin, we saw him have some production last year when there were injuries. Not a bad role player guy. At tight end, they added Mike Gesicki. See what they get out of him. They still have Drew Sample, who's more of a blocker. They drafted Eric All. It's really about Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. And I think for the top 3 for both of us, it's a little bit about the star power in tandems or trios that has propped these teams up.
Yeah, you can't go wrong with Chase and Higgins. And, it'd be nice if Higgins would say, I'll take 3 years at a little more than Nico Collins, because I think we can win Super Bowls here in Cincinnati. That would be nice. I don't think it's going to happen. I think he wants more money, maybe longer term. I love the Jermaine Burton pick. I think Burton is a guy that could slide in to the slot and outperform Trenton Irwin. I think Andre Iosivas performed well last year when called upon, and so did Charlie Jones. I think Jones is a little more of a career wide receiver 5 special teamer guy, but he may show himself as being a viable slot option. But it really revolves around Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. I have no idea what to expect from Mike Gesicki, so I'm choosing not to expect anything, and I will not roster him if I don't already roster him. And if I do, hopefully he has a good game in week 1 and I can move him.
Yeah, I mean, I was hoping Gesicki was going to bounce back last year with New England. Didn't happen. So, hope springs eternal for me this time of year, though. So I haven't given up just yet. Just when I think that I'm out, they pull me back in. Number 2 for us is the Texans. We talked about them a lot at the opening. A great trio of receivers with Collins, Stephon Diggs, and Tank Dell. They have Dalton Schultz at tight end, plus Cade Stover, Brevin Jordan for depth. And they have a lot of depth options at wide receiver. Noah Brown, John Mechie, Ben Skoranek, Xavier Hutchinson. I forgot Robert Woods is still there. So they got a lot of options. For me, they have a good starting core, but also good depth, which was easily vaulted them in the top 2 for me.
I mean, could you have a weirder pairing than Tank Dell and his backup Ben Skoranek? Dell is 5'8" and 165, and Skoranek is 6'3" and 224.
I still don't totally understand why they traded for him, but good on them, I guess. I mean, they have a lot of options.
Dell provided explosiveness. He played outside as well as in the slot, so I think he's got position and scheme versatility. They clearly like what Nico Collins is bringing to the table, and he's their alpha of the future. It'll be interesting to see how Stephon Diggs plays now that he's essentially playing for a contract. But the way Noah Brown stepped in last year and had those monster games, maybe it's the scheme. And, we just don't need to worry about it now. Obviously, you want to have talent, but I like John Mechie coming out, and I liked Xavier Hutchinson. And I think Robert Woods is, he's that glue guy in the locker room now. At tight end with Dalton Schultz and Cade Stover for depth. Quentin Tiarano, I forget how, I'm not looking at his name. Tegan Quinterano is their second string tight end. And, he's a big dude, blocking guy. I think the Texans have a near elite group of pass catchers, and they're paired up with a quarterback that, unless last year was a mirage, is one bad dude.
Then at the top, we have the Miami Dolphins. And I will say, for me, the Dolphins don't have the exceptional depth that the Texans do. I did like them adding Jonnu Smith at tight end, but they definitely don't have as great a tight end room as the Texans. But Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle are an incredible pairing. And then for me, when they added Odell Beckham Jr., and he can be kind of that role-playing third wide receiver, that put it over the top for me, moving them to number 1. They do have, some interesting guys potentially rounding out the room. They have speed and Anthony Schwartz. They have your guy Braxton Berrios. River Craycraft has been a kind of a role player. They have some interesting draft picks, see if they stick. But that top 3 is pretty impressive.
Yeah, it really comes down to who plays the 8 games Odell Beckham is injured and how productive are they? And they've got, Eric Ezukanma was a darling when he came out. But he's been injured and hasn't had a whole lot of chance. River Craycraft was nobody's darling and has done nothing in his career but play well when given an opportunity. Braxton Berrios out of Miami University is he's your quintessential little slot guy. Gets open, short area burst. None of them outside the top 3 bring the skill set that the top 3 have. Even Beckham at 31, 32 years old, he's the Toby Keith of the NFL. He ain't as good as he once was, but he's as good once as he ever was. And you just got to make sure you watch out for that.
Yeah, I mean, speed kills, and they definitely are the speed team too. And they get a lot out of it. So it was a close call for me between them and the Texans, because I like the Texans trio very much, and they feel like they have better depth. But I went ahead and popped Miami up there, so it'll be fun to watch. Well, that'll do it for us today. On Friday, you've heard us grade all the units. Now on Friday, we are going to do our sitting at the end of May, almost June, power rankings for all 32 teams. So that will be interesting. I'm very curious to see where Dennis has his. I may go back and tweak mine a little bit. I did a first pass a couple weeks ago, but I already don't feel happy with it.
Go ahead at 6:45 on Friday. Take a peek and you'll see how mine are shaking out.
Dennis, if people have a little bit of free time during the week, mourning the fact that it's no longer a holiday weekend, what can they do?
Well, they can go ahead and give some good vibes to my 13-year-old son, Cole. We were running a few minutes late tonight. We went to, he had an academic ceremony, finished up 7th grade with magna cum laude grade point average, and was the starting catcher on his baseball team for the school. So I'm very, very proud of Cole. But go to your favorite podcast platform. Seek out the Fantasy Football Roundtable. Give us a like, subscribe, review. We were up 68 spots in Canada last week. Usually we're crushing it in England, but man, we're killing it in Canada now.
Something to look forward to. Well, I hope you guys have a great week, and I'll look forward to about 5 minutes to showtime, seeing what Dennis's power rankings are. See you guys on Friday.